This is the tier list for the artifact selector. New players, returning players, and current players all will get 3 artifact selectors. One thing to keep in mind is that these selectors usually have a 6-month lockout period, which means that Bird's Eye View and Rui Bang probably won't be available. If they do happen to be available, then Bird's Eye View is easily A tier. I need 4 copies of this, and I have 0 so far. And Rui Bang is useless, it's F tier, because there is a better artifact that has the exact same role. Also, the powder shop is something to keep in mind. The artifact that you want might appear in the powder shop instead. The only good artifact in there right now, or not even good, just usable artifact in there right now is Etika Scepter. And this rotates out in 3 days. And I will update the image version at least with the artifacts in the powder shop for any good ones. So you might want to wait and see what's going to be available there. One thing to keep in mind is that artifacts are going to vary, or your artifact prio is going to vary very heavily depending on which units you own, because at least for the artifacts that are selectable in these selectors, they're kind of only really used on 1 to 3 units. The ones that are used very widespread are either 4-star artifacts or limited. Arius Tagahel, and then there's Guardian Ice Crystals and Guiding Light. So for these, it's going to depend on what you plan on rolling and who you own. Like, for example, Secret Scythe is really good on ML Bologna and usable on Edward Elric. If you don't plan on rolling ML Bologna and don't have her already, then you might not need a Secret Scythe anytime soon, and you could consider skipping it even though it's S tier. But let's look at the first artifact. Elbrus Ritual Sword, a knight artifact, gives you a chance to counterattack when an ally is hit. This is really good for knights with strong S1s, and especially ones that have strong passives that are stacked by their S1. This is ML Landy, ML Euphine. Them counterattacking is game-changing. So if you have ML Landy especially, you definitely want a copy of this. ML Euphine can use Holy Sacrifice, but this needs max limit break, so Elbrus is a nice get one and it works option. Any future units that, or any future knights that have strong S1s, bruiser types, might be able to use Elbrus as well. For example of why Elbrus needs to have a strong S1, ML Elenav is really bad with Elbrus because her S1 doesn't really do anything until it's soulburned. Next up, there's Windrider, Thief artifact for DPS. This artifact gives you some attack, and then if you manage to kill a unit, it gives you even more attack for your next turn. And then it also gives you stealth. This stealth is nice because you can kill a unit and kind of hide away a little bit, be a little harder to kill. And the extra attack that you get on your next attack will make your follow-up hit pretty devastating as well. This is used on Genua, Midnight Call Lilius, sometimes BBK. It's good for any units that either have attack buff in their kit already, like Genua and Midnight Call Lilius, or if you expect them to be able to kill without the attack buff or to get attack buff from somewhere else. And then there's Secret Scythe, a warrior artifact. This is the standard warrior bruiser artifact, which is a little bit... The units that are using it are a little bit rough right now for some of them. ML Bologna is still very good for... At least for Arena, she's very, very good, and I still see her use in RTA a good amount. She's probably the premier user of this artifact. ML Ken is really rough. You can use him in Guild War and Arena, and that's about it. And then Edward Elric, his bruiser version, can use this artifact, but he's not picked that much. But this still has a very flexible effect. When your unit is below 50% HP, they will gain healing on their hits and also gain a bunch of attack, so they'll heal up a ton of HP. So long as they don't die before they get to heal, which is why it's mainly used on units with counterattacks like ML Ken or ML Bologna. Then this is a really good artifact, and there's pretty good potential for future warrior bruisers to be able to use this as well. And then now we look at the A tier. A lot of these artifacts are still really good, but they have a bit more issues, I would say. Like, some of the ones at the end are only used on 1 unit. This one needs to be max limit broken or just doesn't function sometimes. But if you have the units that use these artifacts well and you want to use them, they're a good pickup. First up is Bastion of Perlucia, a knight artifact which gives the holder and the unit in the back slot 2-turn barrier and 1-turn immunity. This is nice because it gives a bit of protection for both your knight and your whoever you're hiding. And also the 2 buffs can be used with other buffs, like either stealth from Guiding Light or anti-crit from ML Landy, to block some stripping effects that only strip 2 buffs. For example, ML Politis only strips 2 buffs on her S3, and in Guild War, doing Bastion of Perlucia with some other buff to prevent the immunity from being stripped and resisting the pushback that way by just completely blocking it is pretty common. Some users of this are anything like ML Senya or ML Tywin or ROL. And we've got Abyssal Crown, Mage Artifact. This one is just a chance to stun whenever you land a hit. Artifacts actually ignore hit and miss chance. So land a hit doesn't mean that you have to actually like land it. You can miss and artifacts will still proc. So it's a chance to stun whenever you hit the enemy. Just attack the enemy. This is used on mages that want to spam debuffs, especially stuns. Especially for ones that can hit out of turn, like Slow Tanky Politis does this because she procs her S2 when the enemy uses it on attack. So you can S2, potentially stun them all with your extra attack. Then you can S3 and try to stun them all again. Saltaria, with her spam of AoEs on her S1, can land a ton of stuns. Kind of RNG, but also very annoying and can win you some matches if you have good RNG. And there's Alexa's Basket, a Thief artifact. This is also really good for DPS. This gives you a chance to get attack buff and a chance to get greater attack buff at the start of your turn. The chance to get either one should be about 82%. So a pretty good chance that you get attack buff, and if you get greater attack buff, that's going to increase your damage by so much, you generally should just win the match off of that. This is used on any thieves that don't have attack buff in their kits. Something like Sid, Arbiter Vildred are good options. And then there is Rihanna and Luciola. This artifact is used for thieves as well, especially ones with extra turns in their kit, because this artifact just gives you a chance to get an extra turn when you take a turn. So this can't stack off of itself. If you proc RNL, you won't be able to get another RNL proc off of that. But for units like Ron and Peyra, which have extra turn already, they take 2 turns immediately, which means they have a chance to get 4 turns total. And this could be game-winning in some situations. And then we've got Unseen Observer. This artifact gives you 10 souls when you use it on attack skill, and also gives you some CR push. One nice thing about this artifact is that the 10 souls is static. You only need 1 copy for it. You can only gain the 10 souls once a match, which is why it's mostly used on cleave units. This could be used on ML Politis if you don't have her other options, like Miss Confile. ML Politis can just take the 10 souls and you get to instantly soulburn Genua for greater attack buff or some other unit. It can also be used on ML Elena, because her S2 is an on-attack skill, she'll proc that, get the CR push, get 10 souls, and she also already gets 10 souls, so it's like a free book basically, just plus 20 souls. There's also, for Arena and Guild War, Flan uses this if you're not fighting Bellion. After you soulburn S2 into S3, you can give 10 souls to your DPS. And then Isaria for Guild War, if you're doing Decorv, you can S2 Decorv to reset his S2 and also give him 10 souls. And then there's Golden Rose, another Warrior Bruiser artifact. It's got different conditions from Secret Scythe. It also gives you healing below 50% HP, but instead of the attack buff, it gives you damage boost when you're above 50% HP. So one thing about Golden Rose is that it heals less below 50% HP. It's only 30% at maximum break compared to Sigurd's 50, and also because you're not getting the attack boost when you're below 50%, that's just less damage you'll be dealing, which also converts to less healing. However, the users of this aren't that great right now. There's Edward Elric, I guess, who can also use Sigurd's. His anti-cleave version, if you don't have Leaf Artifact, does use Golden Rose. Lionheart's Hermia is very bad right now. She is getting buffed, and we'll see how much that will do for her. But for now, until the buffs come in, she is trash. And then Emma Lilibet also needs a buff. She is not doing too hot either. So this is a good Warrior Bruiser artifact with a solid effect, just the users aren't really there right now. And there's Holy Sacrifice, a Knight artifact. When your unit dies, there's a chance that they revive. 50 to 100% depending on the level. So this artifact is a little bit annoying because if you don't have max limit break, there's a chance it just doesn't work. But it's really good for any knights that get focused down. Stuff like ML Senya or ML Yufine are really annoying when you finally kill them and they just come back. So do keep in mind that it does need max limit break. So this might not be worth grabbing unless you already have a few copies and you're trying to push a plus 30. There's also Celestine. Celestine's only really used on one unit right now, which is ML Haste, because ML Haste has a bunch of a single target attacks in his kit plus the extra attack. He heals so much. This artifact heals you whenever you use a single target attack. It does have a pretty generalized effect, like healing on single target attack means that there could be potential for future units to use it. But for now, besides some meme builds, it's only really used on Blood Moon Haste. And then there's Secret Art Swordstorm, I think. It's Celine's artifact, a thief artifact. It's a 50 to 100% chance to get attack buff when the enemy uses it on attack skill, and also CR pushes you. So this artifact does have the same issue as Holy Sacrifice, where you're not guaranteed to get the attack buff until plus 30. However, you do always get the CR push, which is nice. This synergizes super well with Celine's kit, so it's definitely her best in slot. And aside from that, right now there's not really any users. Previously, ML Celine would use it, funnily enough, but she's kind of not a real unit right now, so... The effect is pretty good, though. Maybe some future anti-cleave thieves might use this for the CR push to try and cut in. And then there's Doctor's Bag. This is only really used on Light Domniel right now. It gives a cleanse, a 1 debuff cleanse, and a heal when you use it on attack skill once every 3 turns. So this is one of the better Soul Weaver artifacts that isn't limited. One of the problems is that pretty much all of the best Soul Weaver artifact is Guardian Ice Crystals. It's not really close. And Soul Constellation is also really good. These are both limited though, especially Guardian Ice Crystals, which is tied to a collab. But ML Dom is really strong right now, and she's frequently used in both RTA and Guild War and Arena. So she could be, or this could be a really good Arti to pick up if you want her best in slot, but you could give her some other alternatives as well. And then we have the B tier. A lot of these artifacts I feel like are just not on units that kind of suck, or they have some alternatives to them. So there's Shepherd of Chaos, a thief artifact for evasion units. It gives you 20% evasion, and also as your HP lowers, your damage increases from 12 to 24%. 12% base no matter how much HP you're missing. This is good artifact for like Remnant Violet or Save Your Head In, but evasion is so weak right now that I have to put this in B tier. Otherwise, I put this in A tier if evasion wasn't so bad. Shepherd, or this is Double Edge the Crescent, is pretty much the same issue. It's another evasion artifact, 20% evasion, and then a 30% chance, I think, to counterattack at max limit break whenever you successfully dodge an attack. And this is a bit more niche, I would say, because it has to be a unit that benefits from counterattacking. And the RNG proc chance, sometimes you would just rather have Shepherd's more consistent damage. Shepherd can be used on Bloodblade Karin right now, is one of the main users of this. Though she has a bunch of other alternatives, like Hostess of the Banquet, so that's a limited artifact. And sometimes you'll see her on like Windrider or Basket. And then Double Edge the Crescent, I think the only unit I think that uses it right now is Arbiter Vildred, if you're running him on the degen counter build. That's about it. I think these artifacts are actually, like, their effects sound good, it's just evasion sucks. And then there is Spatio-Temporal Fan, a ranger artifact which increases your effectiveness by 20%, and after using on attack skill, has a 50 to 100% chance to grant stealth to the highest attack ally, except for the caster, once every 4 turns. So this artifact is only really used on ML Politis. ML Politis is very strong, but it's all the way down here because her best artifacts are actually Misconfile, and there's an alternative, which is just Unseen Observer. And also the inconsistency of this artifact being another 50 to 100% artifact, where you don't necessarily get the effect unless it's max limit broken. Next up, there is Allegaic something Candle. This artifact gives you a chance of defense break when you attack the enemy. This is mainly used on Faithless Litica. Some very confident and fast Faithless Liticas that don't use Guiding Light. Defense break can be really strong for just your cleave. If you defense break, it's much more damage. Cleave Knockwool can also use this, but the proc chance isn't too high, and also having to pass up on Guiding Light, and also being Cleave only really makes this a bit niche. And there's Rise of Monarch. Right now, this is being used on ML Illinav's fast version, and she is a pretty strong reader right now, so this is a potential option to pick up, but there's a lot of Night artifacts out there. This might be her best in slot, but she's also new and the season hasn't actually started, so you might want people to test her more and see if this ends up staying her best in slot. She does cycle a ton of turns, so this does seem pretty good on her, but definitely worth waiting and seeing, and see if it's worth using a Selector on. Then there's Etika Scepter. This artifact, honestly, is mostly a PvE artifact. Use it on some mages in Earth Expedition for mainly Ball, or Tenebri if you don't have Ball. And then also Carrot or Suthan can use it in Nightmare Raid against our Hakan. And then for PvP, ML Luna can use this if you're running a non-book variant. It's kind of funny when they try to pick Bellion and you just go ML Luna and you don't care and you just spam S2. The S2 spam ML Luna is really annoying because it actually does a pretty good amount of damage. It's a 50% chance to, at max limit break, get your, reduce your cooldowns by 1. I think I forgot to mention, Rise of Monarch gives a barrier to your lowest HP ally every time you take a turn. And then there's Snow Crystal, a warrior artifact. This artifact gives you a 20% chance to not get crit when you get attacked. And it also gives you a CR push when you get hit by a non-crit. This is the artifact that I said was just a better version of Ruibong, which does mean that even though Ruibong is supposed to be Wukong's artifact, you just use Snow Crystal instead if you want to use him in PvP. Aside from that, this artifact doesn't actually have that many uses, and Wukong's not really that strong in PvP, but this artifact is also used on Holiday Yufei because there's no evasion warrior artifacts, so this is the closest thing you'll get to an evasion artifact. And then there is Idol's Chair. There's just this grouping of 4 Soulweaver artifacts. There's Idol's Chair, which gives you CR push to your highest attack ally when the holder gets hit. This is an offensive Soulweaver artifact. It's not used that much. I've seen it used on Blood Moon Haze sometimes as an alternative to Celestine, a more offensive artifact. For PvE, it does pop up here and there. I use it on Rowana in Ice Expedition. And then aside from that, it's nothing too special. There's Stella Harpa, which is Rawana's main artifact for PvP. Every time the unit gets hit, there is like a 60% chance, I think, at max to cleanse 1 debuff. And it doesn't have a turn limit, so if the unit's getting hit a lot, whether because they're getting focused down or you know there's going to be extra attacks, which you would typically pick Rowana into, it's a decent source of cleanse. And there's Shimadra's Staff. It gives you 20% F-res to all allies and also increases the healing that your team receives. This is solid for F-res stacking teams. Maid Chloe uses this super well because it synergizes with her F-res team imprint and also the F-res that she gives people via her S2. And there's Touch of Rekos. Touch of Rekos heals all allies once per turn when the holder gets hit. The proc condition can be a little bit hard to activate because the holder needs to get hit. But this is a pretty decent source of sustain if you know that your Soulweaver that's holding it is going to get hit a decent amount. And then there's PvE artifacts. Bloodstone is really nice. Oops. It's a ranger artifact that heals the lowest HP ally based on the damage dealt. So DPS rangers can use this pretty well. Every once in a while, there's like a place that just suddenly you really want Bloodstone. Like the current Rift, Bologna really likes Bloodstone. It's not mandatory though. But if you play PvE a lot, it's pretty nice to have a copy of Bloodstone, I would say. And there's Song of Stars, which is the very highly rated, gives a chance to land target debuff when you attack with a ranger. It's honestly not really a mandatory artifact, especially with Wyvern being a bit lower priority. It's just a damage increase. I use mine in Expedition just for higher damage numbers. It is kind of nice to have for PvE though. And then there is Spirit's Breath, who I kind of wanted to put in F tier, but I figure I should separately mention, do not Selector this, but it is a usable artifact. It's really funny on an auxiliary lots, because it reduces your cooldowns by 1 after you use an on-attack skill, and A-Lot's S2 is on a 2-turn cooldown, so if you have this at max limit break, he can just infinitely S2. but it does need max limit break, and this isn't a strong enough artifact to justify blowing potions or selectors on, really. So it's really fun once you get a plus 30 just by pure chance, but until then, nah. And then there's all of these artifacts in the F tier, where at this point, just go get a dupe or limit breaker instead or something. Like, get a second Wind Rider, get a second Sigurds, limit break your Holy Sack, something. Like, you could even limit break your Elvers, whatever. It's just, some of these artifacts are usable, of course. Like, I think some of these artifacts in the top row, like, Bloody Rose is used for something like Beam Tech. This is usable on Lilius, but Lilius isn't really that strong, and I wouldn't select this anyways. And this is usable on Peyra, but you can also use like Arnel. Like these artifacts, some of them are usable. I just would not use a selector on them when there's so many better artifacts. So this is the F tier. Go get dupes or limit breaks instead. And that's the artifact selector tier list. I hope this helped anybody who needed it. If you have more questions about it, you can go to the Guidance Grounds channel in the Discord. And there is going to be a link to this tier list in the description